Preface: I never thought my heart could betray me. I'm Luna, an Omega trying to survive in a world that doesn't see me. My best friends, Aiden and Ryan, are everything I've ever wanted: strong, fearless, untouchable. But I was invisible, forbidden, a shadow in the light of their power. Aiden, the alpha prince of our pack, destined to choose his mate, and Ryan, loyal and daring, always by my side. Then, the impossible happened. I discovered that not only was I destined to bond, but to bond with both of them. Aiden and Ryan, my heart shattered and rebuilt itself in ways I never imagined. And just when I thought I could understand my place in this tangled web, I realized I was no ordinary Omega. Dark secrets, hidden powers, and desires I couldn't control pulled me into a world of danger, love, and betrayal. In the shadows of the pack, every heartbeat is a risk, every glance is a confession, and every choice could cost me everything. Would I embrace the bond that was written in my soul, or fight against a destiny that could destroy me? Chapter 1: Moonlit Shadows. The night had a way of stretching itself long and thin, shadows creeping along the stone paths like claws scraping the earth. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, even though the chill wasn't strong enough to justify it. My fingers played with the zipper, a nervous tic I'd had for as long as I could remember. My heartbeat was loud, too loud, echoing in my own ears, dragging my thoughts with it. There was a pull in the night, subtle, insistent, like a current tugging me toward something I didn't want to reach, but couldn't resist either. And as always, that pull seemed to circle around Aiden. He walked ahead, shoulders broad, stride confident, the kind of presence that made you forget to breathe. Even under the dim streetlights, his shadow stretched tall and unyielding, like a silent warning that he belonged to a world I wasn't allowed to touch. My chest constricted involuntarily. A flutter twisting in my stomach I'd long tried to deny. I told myself not to look, not to linger on the curve of his jaw, the way his hands flexed when he walked. But my eyes betrayed me, tracing his every movement, catching that pulse I had loved from afar for years. Ryan was beside me, the other half of the triangle I couldn't escape. He had this effortless calm, the kind that made you feel safe even in a storm. His hand brushed mine once by accident, or maybe deliberately, and my breath caught. That simple touch, fleeting and casual, sent sparks that made my chest thrum in ways I wasn't ready to admit. I shifted slightly, unsure if I wanted him closer or farther away. "Feels different tonight," Ryan murmured, his voice soft but with an edge that made my spine prickle. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual, but the tightness in my throat betrayed me. Ahead, the forest loomed at the edge of the campus. Ancient trees gnarled and twisted like they'd been guarding secrets for centuries. The wind stirred dry leaves, their rustling a subtle percussion under my nervous heartbeat. Every footstep sounded too loud, too exposed, as though the forest itself were watching, judging. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to shrink into my own skin, to disappear into the shadows. But the pull, the one I didn't understand, kept nudging me forward, a thread I couldn't break. The night air carried more than just the smell of fallen leaves. There was musk, something primal, a vibration that made my instincts flare. I knew, without thinking, that there was a presence out there, just beyond the tree line, watching. My body reacted before my mind did, spine stiffened, pulse spiking, senses sharpening. "Luna." Ryan's voice was a tether, grounding me, even as my instincts screamed to flee. "I'm fine," I whispered, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes inside, though my heart hammered with the knowledge that tonight was not going to be ordinary. Then it happened. A low, guttural growl rolled through the trees, so deep it vibrated in my chest. My breath hitched, and the hairs along my arms stood on end. Aiden stopped abruptly, shoulders rigid, head tilted, nostrils flaring slightly as though he were sniffing the danger in the air. His eyes narrowed, sharp and calculating, and I felt the pull in me intensify. Not just fear, something else. Something electric, something I didn't yet understand. Ryan instinctively moved closer, brushing my shoulder again, but this time it was protective, deliberate. His touch sent a jolt through me, and I realized with a shock that the strange pull, the one I'd felt all my life around alphas, wasn't coming from just one source tonight. It was coming from both of them, tangled and inescapable. My instincts screamed at me to step back, to escape, but my body betrayed me, stepping forward instead. Every leaf-crunching step felt like a risk, every shadow a potential threat, yet I couldn't stop. The magnetic pull threading through my chest and stomach was too strong, too insistent. "There's someone out there." Aiden's voice was low, measured, resonant with authority. Even with the growl still rumbling in the trees, his presence felt like a wall I couldn't push past. His gaze swept over the forest, sharp and dangerous, slicing through the darkness. I swallowed hard, heart in my throat. Fear, yes, but also something else. Anticipation, curiosity, a thrill that made my stomach twist. I had always been an Omega, small, overlooked, someone meant to blend into the background. And yet here I was, caught between two alphas, feeling more alive than ever before. The forest itself seemed to lean in closer, branches scraping softly against each other, carrying whispers that sounded almost human. The growl came again, closer this time, vibrating in the ground beneath our feet. My pulse quickened. I could feel it in my chest, in the fine hairs along my arms, in the subtle tremor of my hands. Ryan's grip on my shoulder was grounding, but it did something else too. It sent warmth through me, a silent promise of protection. I glanced at him briefly, then at Aiden, and felt the impossible weight of my feelings pressing down, tangling with instinct and desire. I wanted to run. I wanted to stay. I wanted both. And then the moonlight hit us just right, silver and stark, painting our shadows long and impossibly thin across the forest floor. My heartbeat synchronized with the rhythm of the night, fast and uneven, a drumbeat of warning and excitement. I realized, in that moment, that nothing would ever be the same. I was on the edge of something vast, something dangerous, something that would demand more of me than I had ever known I could give. And deep in the pit of my stomach, a whisper of excitement stirred. Maybe this night would finally change everything. The growl turned into a low, rolling snarl, echoing like distant thunder. The forest seemed to hold its breath, and I stepped forward anyway, because I had no choice. Whatever was waiting in the shadows, I was already halfway there. Chapter 2, Forbidden Bonds. The morning sunlight was sharp and insistent, slicing through the blinds of my bedroom, like a reminder of the world I wasn't sure I wanted to face. The warmth was almost cruel, teasing against the cool tension that had taken root in my chest the night before. I lay in bed, fingers curled around the edge of the blanket, mind spinning with the memory of the forest, the growl, the pull, the way Aiden and Ryan had both seemed to tug at some hidden part of me. I wasn't supposed to feel anything like that. I was an Omega meant to keep quiet, to survive in the background, to admire the alphas from afar. Yet here I was, tangled in feelings I didn't understand, feelings I wasn't allowed to have. The bell rang, breaking my spiral of thought. School, the very place that made the rules of pack hierarchy unavoidable. As I walked through the hallways, the chatter of students felt distant, like I was underwater. Eyes occasionally flicked my way, some curious, some indifferent. Lauren swept past with her signature smirk, her blonde hair catching the sunlight like a halo she thought she owned. She had Aiden's attention, or at least she worked hard to pretend she did, and Ariana, my twin, my mirror in so many ways, seemed to have this effortless ability to flirt with Aiden without a trace of self-consciousness. Watching them both made my stomach twist. I was invisible to Aiden in the ways that mattered most, or so I thought. Ryan caught up with me near the lockers, his expression calm, but I noticed the faint tightness around his eyes, the way his jaw clenched ever so slightly. He must have noticed the same thing I did. The shift in the forest last night, the low vibration in the air that had threaded through the three of us. "You okay?" he asked, his hand brushing mine as if testing the answer. I forced a smile. Yeah, just tired. A lie, but the only one I could offer without betraying the storm inside. The classroom smelled of polished wood and ink, a sharp contrast to the earthy scent of the forest. The teacher droned on, but my mind kept wandering. I could still feel the pull from last night, a subtle tremor in my chest that refused to settle. And I knew, deep down, that Aiden and Ryan felt it too. That pull. It wasn't just desire. It was recognition. Lunchtime was a minefield. Lauren sat across from Aiden, laughing at something he barely seemed to hear. Ariana leaned on his shoulder, whispering jokes that only he could hear. And I sat at the edge, picking at my food, pretending not to notice the pangs twisting my stomach. Ryan slid onto the bench beside me, his hand brushing mine again, this time with more intention. "You're thinking too much," he said softly, eyes scanning the cafeteria as if guarding me from invisible predators. "I can't help it," I whispered. And I realized the truth. I didn't just want to be near them. I wanted to belong to them, in ways I had no right to even imagine. The warning signs of pack life were never far away. Whispers of alpha authority, unspoken rules, and the hierarchy we lived under pressed down on me. If Aiden chose his mate tomorrow, it wouldn't be me. I knew that. But the pull, the undeniable magnetism between us, hinted at something forbidden. Something that should have been impossible after school. The training grounds called wolves of all ranks patrolled the edges, and the scent of alpha dominance hung in the air like a storm cloud. Aiden was already there, stretching, muscles coiled and ready. His presence made my knees weak in a way I hated to admit. Ryan followed a few steps behind, always alert, always aware of the invisible rules we all had to navigate. "Luna?" Aiden said, his voice low but commanding. The way he said my name made the hair on my arms stand on end. "Come here." My heart skipped. I walked toward him, each step heavy with the weight of expectation and desire. The forest beyond the training ground whispered with wind through the trees, shadows stretching long and hungry. I felt exposed, like prey stepping toward predators, but not in the way I feared. I felt alive. He studied me, eyes dark, unreadable, and I realized I was holding my breath. My instincts screamed to look away, to run, but my body refused. Ryan stepped closer, hand lightly brushing my back, a silent tether, a promise of protection. And in that instant, I understood something. I wasn't just an Omega. Something was stirring inside me, something old, something powerful. The lesson began, but I barely noticed the exercises. My focus was on them, on the subtle ways Aiden's gaze lingered, the way Ryan's hand occasionally brushed mine, how the pull in my chest tightened, insistent, like it was guiding me toward a truth I wasn't ready to face. By the time training ended, dusk had fallen. Shadows stretched long and black across the ground, and the forest seemed to lean closer, listening. The growl from last night echoed faintly in my mind, a reminder that the world outside these walls was dangerous, that my feelings, my instincts, were not safe. Ryan caught up with me as we left the grounds. "You felt it last night, didn't you?" His tone was gentle, probing. I hesitated. My throat felt dry. I don't know what I felt," I admitted finally. He gave a small nod, understanding. "It's okay, you're not alone in it. None of us are." The words should have comforted me, but instead they made my chest ache. Not just because of what they meant, but because of what they implied. Forbidden bonds, desires we weren't meant to entertain, instincts that could destroy everything if they were followed. And as we walked back through the forest edge, the first stars of night glittering above, I realized something terrifying. The rules that were supposed to govern us didn't apply the way I thought. Something had shifted. Something had chosen us, Aiden, Ryan, and me, and I was powerless to resist it. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint, low hum of the pack beyond the shadows. And I knew, deep in my bones, that nothing would ever be simple again. Because the bonds forming tonight weren't just forbidden, they were inevitable. Chapter 3. The Alpha Prince. The morning sun was cruelly bright, streaming through the tall windows of the Wolf Academy's main hall and casting golden streaks across polished floors. The scent of pine and damp earth from the surrounding forest still clung to me, mingling with the faint smell of the training mats and freshly sharpened pencils. It was ironic. Inside these walls, everything was orderly and controlled. Yet my chest felt like it was constantly on the verge of chaos. Aiden was already there, standing near the front, moving with the calm precision that made him seem untouchable. Every gesture was measured, deliberate. Even as students filed in, chattering and laughing, he seemed separate from it all, like a king observing his kingdom. My stomach twisted. I knew I shouldn't be staring, that I should maintain distance, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. The pull, the same magnetic tug I had felt in the forest, was there again, subtle but insistent, and it made my fingers twitch nervously at the edge of my desk. Ryan slid into the seat beside me, quiet as always, eyes scanning the room as if anticipating threats no one else could see. His presence was grounding, yes, but also frustrating. He made it too easy to forget myself, to lose control of the fragile boundary I tried so hard to maintain between desire and survival. Today, we'll discuss leadership within the pack, the instructor announced, voice crisp and sharp, cutting through my thoughts. The words should have meant little to me. I was an Omega, after all, but every syllable seemed layered with threat and expectation. Alphas were born to lead, taught to dominate, and I was reminded once again that the world I lived in was not built for someone like me. Aiden's gaze found mine for a fleeting moment, and something in me stuttered. He didn't smile, didn't nod. He simply acknowledged me with the weight of his attention. The pull in my chest tightened, leaving a strange warmth coiling low in my stomach. I had to look away before my cheeks betrayed me, flushed and hot. Lauren was whispering something to Ariana across the room. Their heads close together, plotting or laughing. It didn't matter which. The pang in my chest was sharp, visceral. I wanted to shrink, to vanish into the background where they couldn't reach me, couldn't remind me that I was insignificant in ways they never would be. Yet the pull, the insistent tug from both Aiden and Ryan, anchored me in place, forcing me to stay, to confront my own impossible desires. After class, the training yard beckoned with its familiar, oppressive scent of sweat and pine. Wolves of all ranks moved with coiled energy, muscles taut beneath sleek fur or well-fitted uniforms. Aiden was already stretching at the edge, every movement precise, radiating control. Even from a distance, he drew eyes and hearts toward him. I took a steadying breath and followed, heels crunching over gravel, nerves humming. Luna, Aiden's voice cut through the air like a blade, low and commanding. The way he said my name made the hairs on my arms rise, my heart flutter, and my instincts scream. I approached, careful, controlled, even though every fiber of my being wanted to throw caution to the wind. Ryan trailed slightly behind, hand occasionally brushing mine, a silent reassurance and tether. The forest beyond the yard whispered around us, shadows deepening as the sun dipped, and I felt again that strange pull, the recognition, the hunger, the connection that defied everything I had been told about my place in this world. The exercises began, drills designed for alphas, testing reflexes, strength, and dominance. I tried to focus, to occupy my mind with patterns and footwork, but my attention kept snapping back to them. The subtle ways Aiden's gaze lingered, the unintentional brush of Ryan's hand, the way both of them radiated power that my body couldn't ignore. It all tightened in my chest, an ache I didn't know how to name. During a sparring exercise, Aiden's eyes locked on mine. His stance was perfect, unyielding, but the intensity in his gaze made my legs weak. I stumbled slightly, heart pounding, and he raised a single eyebrow, a silent acknowledgement of my presence. Not a word, not a smile, just him noticing me in a way that made the world tilt. Ryan caught my stumble with a hand at my elbow, steadying me, his touch warm, grounding, and frustratingly intimate. "You're okay," he said softly, but I felt the tremor in my stomach betray the truth. I wasn't okay. Not with them. Not with this pull threading between us, unspoken, undeniable, and forbidden. By the time practice ended, sweat glistened along my skin, my uniform sticking uncomfortably. The sun was low, spilling blood, orange light across the yard. Shadows stretched long, intertwining with the tendrils of fear, desire, and confusion that tangled inside me. I knew that whatever pull had threaded through me since the forest, since last night, wasn't just desire or instinct. It was something more, something forbidden, something I wasn't supposed to feel. Aiden walked past me then, close enough for the heat from his body to brush my own, and I had to swallow hard to keep my knees from giving out. Ryan's presence behind me was just as undeniable, a quiet, protective force that sent warmth and tension coiling through me. I realized with a sharp pang of fear and longing that this tension, this pull, this impossible connection was shaping me in ways I could not control. As the shadows deepened and the last light bled from the sky, I understood the truth. My world had shifted. The rules I had relied on, the boundaries that had kept me safe, were meaningless now. Bonds were forming, bonds that were forbidden, dangerous, and utterly irresistible. And whether I wanted them or not, I was already caught between two alphas, and there was no turning back. Chapter 4: Hidden Strengths. The forest behind the academy felt alive tonight, whispering secrets through the swaying branches. Shadows flickered like dark dancers across the leaf-strewn ground, and the cool night air pressed against my skin, sending tiny shivers along my arms. I pulled my jacket tighter, though I knew it wasn't the cold that made me tremble. It was anticipation, fear, and something else. Something deeper. Something I couldn't yet name. Aiden was ahead, moving with that effortless control I could never match. His presence seemed to bend the very air around him, drawing me in without a word. Ryan followed, ever vigilant, his calm energy tethering me even as my instincts screamed to follow Aiden alone. And somewhere in the tangle of these feelings, I realized I was no longer just an Omega who observed. Something within me was stirring, something I had never felt before. "Luna, focus," Ryan said, his voice low, almost a rumble. His hand brushed mine briefly, grounding me. I flinched, not from fear, but from the magnetic pull between us. The sensation was confusing, exhilarating, terrifying. I wanted to pull away, to resist, but my body betrayed me, inching forward even as my mind screamed caution. We reached a small clearing, the moonlight spilling over the ground in silver pools. Aiden stopped and turned to me, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Tonite," he said, voice carrying an edge that made my chest tighten. "We're going to test more than your reflexes. Tonight, we'll see what you're truly capable of." I nodded, trying to appear calm, though my pulse was racing. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the rustling leaves and distant owl calls creating a rhythm that matched the pounding of my heart. There was something in the air, an almost electric tension, that made every nerve in my body hum. Aiden stepped closer. I could feel the heat radiating from him, the subtle scent of pine and musk mingling with the natural alpha pheromones that always seemed to assault me. My knees weakened, my breath catching, but I forced myself to remain steady. Ryan's presence behind me was a quiet counterbalance, his warmth brushing my back, anchoring me even as the pull from Aiden intensified. "Show me your strength," Aiden said, gesturing toward the center of the clearing. "Let it flow. Don't fight it." I hesitated. My mind screamed that I couldn't, that I wasn't ready, that I was too weak. But then something deep inside shifted. A warmth started in my chest, radiating outward, tingling through my limbs. I felt different, powerful, in a way I had never imagined. My Omega instincts, my deepest fears and desires, were being overtaken by something raw and intense. I closed my eyes, focusing on the sensation, letting it rise. The air seemed to pulse with my heartbeat. My ears picked up every subtle sound, the distant snapping of a twig, the rustle of leaves, the low growl of a wolf somewhere in the shadows. My skin prickled, every hair standing on end, and then it happened. A flash of power surged through me, a light in the darkness, and I realized with a shock that I could sense not just Aiden and Ryan, but something deeper, an energy connecting all three of us. The bond wasn't just instinctual anymore, it was tangible, pulling us together, vibrating in a rhythm only we could feel. My knees buckled, and I stumbled, caught by Ryan's steadying hand, his eyes wide with surprise. You felt it too," he whispered, awe and disbelief mingling in his tone. I nodded, breathless, heart hammering. I don't know what this is." Aiden's eyes glimmered with something unreadable. It's not just what you feel, it's what you are. His voice was soft now, but every word carried weight. You're stronger than you know, Luna. More than any Omega we've ever seen. My mind raced, stronger. Me, I had always believed I was weak, powerless, meant to stay in the shadows. And yet here I was, trembling with energy that seemed to recognize both alphas as if it had always been waiting for them. My chest tightened, a mix of fear and exhilaration, and I realized I had no idea how to control it. Ryan squeezed my hand, and I felt another wave of grounding warmth. "We'll help you," he said simply. "We'll make sure you don't fall." But I wasn't sure falling was the danger anymore. The danger, I realized, was everything else. The pull toward them, the forbidden bond, the way my instincts and desires tangled into something unmanageable. And the forest around us seemed to watch, silent and patient, as though it had been waiting for this moment for centuries. The night stretched on, and I practiced, letting the energy flow, learning to control it, at least a little. Every movement, every breath, every pulse of my heartbeat was magnified. Shadows seemed sharper, sounds clearer. Even the smallest touch from Ryan or glance from Aiden sent shivers through me. By the time we left the clearing, the moon was high, silver, and stark. My legs were sore, my mind buzzing with power and fear, but beneath it all was a quiet certainty. Nothing would ever be the same. I wasn't just an Omega anymore. I was something more, something rare, something dangerous. And the bond between us three was no longer just a thread. It was a rope, winding tightly, pulling us together in ways I didn't fully understand. I glanced at Aiden and Ryan, and my chest ached with longing and fear. The pull wasn't just physical, it was emotional, instinctual, and inevitable. The forest whispered around us, a wind rustling through leaves like a soft warning. And I knew, deep in my bones, that the strength I had discovered tonight would be tested. Not just by training, or by the forest, or by the pack rules, but by what was rising inside me, and what was waiting for us in the shadows. Because the bond we shared was more than forbidden. It was dangerous, and it was unstoppable. Chapter 5, The Bond Awakens. The night hung heavy over the Wolf Academy, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and the moon glinted silver through the branches, spilling across the clearing in shards of light. My heartbeat raced, each thump echoing in my ears, tethered to the strange, insistent pull that had been threading through me since the forest. I could feel it now, stronger, more urgent, like it was pulling me toward something inevitable, toward them. Aiden stood at the center of the clearing, muscles coiled, his eyes dark and unreadable in the moonlight. Ryan was beside me, his presence steady, grounding, and yet his hand, brushing mine, sent sparks that made my stomach twist. The air between us was charged, alive, vibrating with tension that went beyond the ordinary. "You're ready?" Aiden said, voice low but commanding, carrying over the whisper of the trees. "Tonight, you'll know where you belong." I swallowed hard, a lump of fear and anticipation lodged in my throat. My mind screamed at me to resist, to run, to deny the pull that had already wrapped itself around my chest. But my body refused. It moved forward, almost of its own accord. drawn toward Aiden and the invisible thread connecting us. Ryan's eyes met mine, his gaze steady, reassuring, but also intense, full of questions I didn't have the courage to answer. "I'm here," he whispered, and it was enough. For a moment, I let myself breathe, though the air felt thick, heavy with power and expectation. Aiden lifted his hand, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. "Step forward," he commanded. "Feel it. Accept it." The words were simple, yet they carried a weight that pressed down on me, rooting me to the ground. I closed my eyes, letting my senses expand. The forest around us fell away. All I could feel was them, Aiden, Ryan, and the thread of energy that connected us, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. It was warmth and hunger and desire, all rolled into one, and it made my breath catch. And then it happened. The bond ignited, a sudden surge of energy that coursed through my body, lifting me off my feet in sensation if not in motion. My vision blurred, the moonlight fracturing into streaks of silver and gold. I could feel Aiden's presence like a tide against me, strong and commanding, pulling me closer, anchoring me. Ryan's energy wrapped around me, steady and unyielding, like the ground beneath my feet, grounding yet insistent. I gasped, my hands gripping at the air as the sensation rippled through me. Fear, exhilaration, longing, they all collided, twisting into a sensation I could barely comprehend. My Omega instincts screamed to surrender, to succumb, but my mind clung desperately to control. "You're his mate," Aiden said, his voice softer now, almost reverent. "And yours," he added, looking at Ryan, who nodded, eyes wide with the same awe I felt. "Mate?" The word echoed in my mind, heavy and impossible, and yet undeniable. The bond wasn't just instinct, not just desire. It was recognition, connection, inevitability, and it terrified me. I stumbled, and Ryan caught me, his hand warm and firm. "You're okay," he murmured. But the tremor running through me wasn't fear. It was something else, something raw, unfiltered. The bond was awakening, and with it, every feeling I had ever buried, every desire I had tried to deny, surged to the surface. Aiden stepped closer, the heat radiating from him making my knees weak. "You're stronger than you know, Luna," he said. "And this bond only amplifies that." I blinked, the moonlight catching my tears, stronger. I had always thought of myself as weak, as invisible, as someone meant to survive quietly in the background. And yet, with the bond, I could feel power energy I hadn't known I possessed, connected not just to myself, but to them. Ryan's fingers brushed mine again, a grounding, calming presence. "We'll guide you," he whispered. "We're in this together." But I wasn't sure I wanted guidance. The bond was intoxicating, almost overwhelming, and it made me ache in ways that frightened me. Desire, loyalty, instinct, fear. They all collided in my chest, twisting and knotting into something impossible to unravel. Aiden's gaze met mine, dark and commanding. "Let it flow," he said. "Don't fight it." And I didn't. I felt the energy surge again, this time more controlled, more precise. My body trembled, but I could feel the threads of the bond weaving tighter, connecting us in ways that went beyond words or touch. It was instinctual, undeniable, and utterly consuming. Ryan leaned closer, his warmth mingling with Aiden's, and I realized something terrifyingly beautiful. I was theirs, and they were mine. The forest around us whispered, shadows deepening, wind rustling through the leaves like a soft warning. The bond was not just awakening, it was alive, a force that could not be stopped, and I could feel the pull of destiny threading through every nerve, every heartbeat, every breath. I gasped again, overwhelmed, and yet, at the same time, I felt complete. The bond had awakened, and with it, everything I had feared and desired had become one. And in the silver light of the moon, I understood something I couldn't deny. Nothing in my life would ever be simple again. Because I wasn't just an Omega anymore. I was part of something greater, something unstoppable, something bound by fangs. Chapter 6. Tides of Desire. The sun had barely risen, yet the Wolf Academy's grounds were already alive with movement. Wolves of every rank trained with the precision and intensity that came with centuries of ritual and expectation. The air smelled of pine, sweat, and earth, mingling with the faint metallic tang of adrenaline that seemed to hang above every wolf in the field. I walked with Ryan, side by side, our hands brushing occasionally in the small, familiar way that had become a lifeline. The bond had fully awakened, and its pull was undeniable. Every glance at Aiden, every accidental brush of our fingers, sent shivers through me that were impossible to ignore. And yet, beneath the thrill was an undercurrent of fear. Fear that this connection was too strong, too consuming, too dangerous. Aiden stood at the center of the training yard, arms crossed, eyes scanning us like a predator surveying territory. His presence alone made the forest edge seem smaller, the shadows closer. The sunlight hit his hair, the glint in his eyes sharp enough to cut. I wanted to run to him. I wanted to hide. I wanted both all at once. Lauren swept past with her usual arrogance, whispering and laughing in a way that made my stomach twist. She hadn't given up on Aiden, and the tension in her gaze when she caught his eye reminded me just how impossible this world was for someone like me. And Ariana, my twin, always so close to him, so effortlessly charming, it made my chest ache, a quiet, gnawing pain that even the bond couldn't soothe. Ryan's hand found mine again, grounding me. "Ignore them," he murmured, his voice low, steady. "Focus on us." But ignoring them was impossible. The jealousy, the comparisons, the unspoken competition, they all clawed at me, stirring doubts I didn't want to face. I knew my place, I thought I did. Yet the bond made everything uncertain. Aiden's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. "Luna, today you'll learn control, strength, how to wield the bond without losing yourself." The words were a challenge, and I felt the familiar pull in my chest tighten. I stepped forward, the forest edge breathing around me, leaves rustling like whispers of warning. Ryan moved with me, his presence both comforting and maddening. I could feel his heartbeat, steady and calm, even as mine raced, and I realized how intertwined our energies had become. The exercises began. I was paired with Aiden first, our movements mirroring and clashing, an unspoken dance of power. Every touch of his hand, every shift of his weight, sent sparks through me that made my head swim. My body responded before my mind could process it, instincts mingling with desire, and I had to bite back a gasp. Ryan watched, his expression unreadable. I felt the pull of the bond toward him too, a quiet, steady tug that reminded me he was there, always, always watching. The three of us, bound together in ways I couldn't explain, moved through the training, tension coiling tighter with every breath, every glance, every brush of skin against skin. By the time the drills ended, sweat dripped along my spine, muscles trembling from exertion. But the tension hadn't eased. If anything, it had intensified. The bond between us was no longer a whisper. It was a tide, relentless, pulling me in directions I wasn't sure I wanted to go. Aiden approached then, close enough for me to feel the heat radiating from him. "You're progressing faster than expected," he said, voice low, authoritative, but with a hint of something softer beneath the surface. His eyes met mine, dark and impossible, and I realized my knees were weak. Ryan stepped in beside me, brushing against my arm, grounding me, anchoring me, and yet my chest ached for both of them, the impossible tension coiling tighter, a storm I couldn't escape. "Luna," Aiden continued, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips, "the bond doesn't just connect us, it amplifies who you are, who we are." The words should have comforted me, reassured me, but instead, they made the ache in my chest sharper. I wanted both of them. I feared both of them. I didn't know where the bond ended, and my desire began. The sun was dipping low, shadows stretching long across the training yard. Wolves filed out, but we remained, caught in our own orbit. the forest edge whispering around us, warning, tempting, alive. I felt it then, a faint tremor, a growl from deeper in the woods, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable. My pulse quickened. The forest was speaking, warning, threatening. Aiden's gaze flicked to the shadows, alert, taut. Ryan's hand tightened around mine, a silent reassurance and warning. The bond pulsed between us, not just connection, but awareness, an instinctual alert that something was moving in the darkness, something that could change everything. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my trembling body. "What is it?" I whispered. Aiden's jaw tightened, eyes narrowing toward the tree line. "Something or someone is watching." Ryan's hand pressed against mine, firm and grounding. But even as his warmth anchored me, I felt the bond surge with anticipation, desire, and fear. We were tied together in ways I didn't understand yet, pulled not just by instinct, but by something that felt older than the forest, older than the academy. The growl came again, closer this time, and I realized with a jolt that the bond was reacting, protective, warning, alive. My heartbeat synchronized with theirs, a rhythm of shared instinct and rising tension. And then the pull, the bond, tugged insistently, urging me toward the shadows, toward whatever waited for us. I glanced at Aiden and Ryan, hearts and eyes locked in shared understanding. And I realized the truth. The tides of desire, fear, and power were no longer separate. They were one, and we were caught in them, impossible and unstoppable together. The forest waited, alive and patient, as the bond surged, and I knew we had crossed the threshold. Nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 7. Shadows in the Woods. The forest at night was alive, but not in a gentle way. The wind whispered through the trees like voices carrying secrets, and shadows twisted unnaturally, stretching across the ground in patterns that made my skin crawl. Every step I took on the leaf-strewn path was deliberate, cautious, yet my instincts screamed that danger was near. Aiden moved ahead, silent and commanding, his presence a constant force that pulled me forward even as the unease in my chest twisted tighter. Ryan walked beside me, calm, steady, but the subtle tension in his posture betrayed a vigilance I hadn't seen before. The bond between us pulsed, a living thread of energy that hummed with awareness, warning, and desire. "Something's here," Aiden murmured, eyes narrowing toward the thickening shadows. His voice was low, authoritative, yet there was an edge of tension that made the hairs on the back of my neck rise. I swallowed, gripping my jacket tighter. "What is it?" My voice trembled, betraying both fear and anticipation. Ryan's hand brushed mine, grounding, anchoring me. "I don't know yet," he said softly, "but we'll find out." The forest seemed to respond to the bond between us, shadows flickering as if alive, rustling leaves echoing like distant whispers. I could feel the presence of something watching, something that didn't belong. My omega instincts flared, mingling with the bond, sharpening my senses. Every sound was magnified. The crack of a twig, the faint brush of leaves, the low hum of energy in the air. Aiden signaled us to stop. The clearing ahead was silent, moonlight spilling across it in silver pools. I could see his muscles tense, every fiber of his body coiled and ready. Ryan mirrored him, his calm demeanor masking the heightened awareness I could feel pulsing through him. And then I saw it. A figure, cloaked in shadows, moved at the edge of the clearing. Its presence was wrong, unnatural. It sent foreign to the forest, to the pack, to everything I knew. My breath caught, a sharp spike of fear mixing with adrenaline, and the bond between us surged, warning, protective, alive. "Stay close," Aiden ordered, his eyes never leaving the figure. "Don't engage unless I say." I nodded, though my heart was hammering, my pulse sinking with the rhythm of the bond. Ryan's hand found mine again, steady, grounding, and yet every touch sent sparks through me, making the ache of desire, fear, and anticipation coil tighter in my chest. The figure moved closer, silent and deliberate, and I felt a strange pull and energy that resonated with the bond, like it was testing us, probing for weakness. My instincts screamed to flee, to hide, but the bond anchored me, pulling me forward, urging me to stand, to face this unknown threat. Aiden stepped forward, his voice low and commanding, "Reveal yourself." The shadows shifted, and the figure stepped into the moonlight. Its eyes glinted unnaturally, a predator's gaze that sent chills down my spine. I felt the bond tighten, a protective surge that wrapped around me, around Ryan, around Aiden. It was warning. It was demand. It was anticipation. Ryan moved closer, protective, his hand brushing mine once more, a silent reminder that we were together in this. I could feel the tension in his body, the pull of desire, the instinctual need to guard me. And yet, even as I clung to him, I felt the draw of Aiden, the magnetic force of his presence, pulling me toward him in a way that made my knees weak. The figure's lips curled into a cruel smile. "So, the Omega and her alphas," it hissed. "I've been looking for you." A chill ran down my spine. "Who are you?" I demanded, though my voice trembled. The figure's gaze flicked to the bond, eyes narrowing. "Someone who knows what you are and what you can't yet control." The bond surged, warning us, igniting in a rhythm that mirrored my heartbeat. My chest ached, desire and fear coiling together, and I realized with a jolt that the three of us, Aiden, Ryan, and I, were more connected than ever, the thread of the bond alive, responsive, protective. Aiden stepped forward, dominant, commanding. "You'll not harm her. Not while I stand." Ryan mirrored him, protective, grounding, his hand brushing mine in reassurance, and the bond pulsed stronger, thrumming with energy that radiated from me, through me, binding us together. The forest seemed to lean closer, shadows twisting, wind rustling like whispers of warning. The figure laughed, a cruel, low sound. "We'll see about that." I felt the surge of power within me, stronger now, more controlled than before. The bond was no longer just a thread, it was a rope, unbreakable, connecting us in ways I had never imagined. Desire, instinct, fear, and power collided in my chest, coiling into a force that I could feel responding to every heartbeat of the two alphas beside me. Aiden's eyes met mine, dark, intense, commanding. Ryan's hand squeezed mine, grounding yet igniting the ache in my chest. The three of us were a force, and the forest, the shadows, the threat before us, they all seemed to recognize it. The figure took a step closer, and the bond reacted instantly, protective, alive, surging outward like a pulse of warning. My body trembled, fear and exhilaration intertwining, and I realized with a jolt we were ready. Together, unstoppable, bound by something older than the forest, older than the pack, older than instinct itself. The shadows stirred, the night held its breath, and I understood, deep in my bones, that nothing, no threat, no fear, no force, would break the bond between us, because the bond was alive, and it would fight for us. Chapter 8, Trials of Fire. The first rays of dawn filtered through the dense canopy, casting fractured light across the Wolf Academy's training grounds. Mist clung to the earth, curling around the bases of the pines, giving the clearing an otherworldly glow. I could still feel the pulse of last night's encounter, the shadow in the forest, the surge of the bond, the way Aiden and Ryan had anchored me even as the fear and desire coiled together in my chest. Today, there would be no ordinary training. Aiden had made it clear the bond needed control. Strength, mastery, and I knew, deep down, that failure wasn't an option, not with them, not with what we had become. "Luna," Aiden's voice sliced through the mist, crisp and commanding. He was already in position, stance perfect, muscles coiled, his eyes locked on mine, dark and intense, sending a shiver down my spine. "We start with fire trials." I swallowed, trying to steady the tremor in my hands. Fire trials weren't just physical, they were a test of mental and emotional control, of instinct, of the bond. and I could feel it thrumming in me, impatient, alive, demanding. Ryan stepped beside me, his presence a steadying force. His hand brushed mine, grounding me, and yet every touch set my nerves alight. The ache between us, the pull toward both him and Aiden, tightened in my chest. I wanted them. I feared them. I needed them both, and yet the trials demanded focus. The instructor ignited the first flames, small and controlled, but fierce. They danced and twisted, reflecting in Aiden's eyes as he moved with fluid precision. The bond pulsed, vibrating through me, connecting me to both alphas. I could feel their energy, the rhythm of their hearts, the subtle shift of their muscles. Every instinct, every desire, every fear amplified. "Control the bond," Aiden said softly, voice carrying through the crackling of fire. "Let it flow. Don't let it overwhelm you." I focused, inhaling the forest air, tasting the pine and smoke, feeling the warmth of the flames licking my senses without fear. The bond surged in response, a living thread of energy connecting me to them, amplifying my instincts, my power. My Omega senses heightened. I could anticipate the flames' movement, feel their hunger, their aggression, and weave my control around them. Ryan guided me silently, his hand brushing my back, a subtle reassurance. The bond throbbed between us, a tether and a warning. I could feel his heartbeat, steady, grounding, even as desire coiled tight, making it nearly impossible to focus. Aiden moved closer, the heat of his body almost tangible against mine. "Good," he murmured. His gaze held mine, a silent test, a challenge. Every brush of his presence sent shivers down my spine, a mix of fear, longing, and anticipation. I faltered briefly, and Ryan's hand tightened over mine, steadying, anchoring. The flames leapt higher, more unpredictable, and the instructor added a second challenge. Now we weren't just controlling energy, we were controlling our instincts, our emotions, and the bond itself. The pressure was intense, almost suffocating. Every heartbeat echoed in my chest like a drum. Every breath synced to the pull of Aiden and Ryan. Every thought tethered to the rhythm of the bond. I stumbled, almost faltering under the weight of their combined presence, the intensity of the trials, and the surge of desire that made my body ache. I can't," I whispered, panic rising. "You can," Ryan said firmly, his voice a grounding hum in the chaos. "We're here. Focus on us." The bond pulsed stronger, alive, thrumming through me. I inhaled, centering myself, letting the energy flow rather than fight it. The fire danced around me, but I could anticipate its movement, channel its heat through the bond, and direct it with precision. My body trembled with the effort, yet exhilaration surged, coiling with the ache of desire that refused to abate. Aiden stepped closer, hand brushing against mine, not quite touching, yet the proximity igniting every nerve. "See, you're stronger than you know," he murmured. His voice was low, commanding, yet infused with something intimate, almost dangerous. I couldn't respond, couldn't speak, couldn't even focus entirely on the flames. Desire, fear, and the raw, pulsing bond tangled inside me, making every nerve scream, every muscle tremble. Ryan's hand found mine again, firm, grounding, and yet sending waves of warmth and tension through me. The flames roared, testing us further. My control wavered, and instinctively, I reached out with the bond, letting it surge through Aiden and Ryan, amplifying our connection, synchronizing our energy. The bond responded, thrumming in harmony with the flames, a living thread of power that pulsed through all three of us. By the end of the trial, sweat dripped from my brow, muscles quivering, chest tight with exertion and emotion. The flames had calmed, responding to our combined will, and I felt the bond settle, strong and steady. My heart raced, but the ache, the pull, the desire remained, coiled tight and insistent. Aiden stepped back, a faint smile tugging at his lips, dark eyes glimmering with intensity. "Well done!" Ryan's hand lingered over mine, a quiet reassurance, grounding, anchoring. "You did it," he whispered. His voice held warmth, pride, and something else I couldn't name. Desire, longing, connection. I looked between them, heart hammering, mind spinning. The trials had shown me strength I hadn't known I possessed, but also desire, fear, and connection that terrified and exhilarated me. The bond was alive, pulsing, insistent, and I realized with a jolt that control was only the beginning. Because the fire had not only tested my power, it had exposed my heart, and it was caught between two alphas, bound by instinct, desire, and fate itself. The forest whispered around us, shadows stretching long, the mist curling like fingers. The trials were over, but the real test, the test of heart, bond, and survival, was only beginning. Chapter 9. Web of Secrets. The academy felt different today, heavier somehow, as if the walls themselves carried secrets they were waiting for someone to uncover. The morning air was crisp, sharp, cutting through the fog that clung stubbornly to the treetops, and every step I took toward the central hall made my pulse quicken, not from exercise, but from the weight of anticipation and dread. Aiden walked ahead, tall and commanding, exuding the quiet authority that had always drawn the pack to him. Every movement he made radiated confidence, yet I could feel the subtle tension in his body, the slight tightening of his jaw, the shadow behind his eyes that hinted he, too, knew more than he let on. Ryan was at my side, calm as ever, but I could feel his alertness, the way his muscles twitched under his jacket, ready to react at the slightest threat. The bond pulsed between us, alive, insistent, tugging at me, threading through my thoughts, emotions, and desires. It had grown stronger, unbreakable, and yet the intimacy it fostered only intensified the ache of wanting both of them and fearing what that would mean. "Something's happening," Ryan murmured, his breath brushing my ear, warm and grounding. "I can feel it. Within the walls, the pack. It's all stirring." I swallowed, trying to steady my nerves. The bond thrummed with awareness, responding to the unspoken tension that hung over the academy. Every shadow seemed sharper. Every whisper of wind through the trees felt like it carried a secret. We entered the main hall. The room was vast, vaulted ceilings of dark wood, banners of old wolf clans hanging along the walls, symbols of legacy and power. The elders were gathered, faces grim, eyes sharp, scanning the room with the weight of knowledge that none of the students could yet understand. Aiden stepped forward, voice low, commanding, but with an undercurrent of urgency that made the hair on my arms rise. "The pack faces threats we've underestimated. Secrets long buried are resurfacing, and Luna," his gaze found me, dark and piercing. "You and the bond you share with us, it's more significant than anyone realizes." I felt the weight of his words like a physical force, more significant. I had known the bond was powerful, but significance implied purpose, destiny, perhaps even danger. My chest tightened, a mixture of fear, exhilaration, and the ache of desire that never fully subsided. Ryan stepped closer, protective, his hand brushing mine in a silent reassurance. "Whatever it is," he said softly, "we face it together." The elders began to speak, revealing fragments of truths that were at once shocking and terrifying. Ancient rivalries, forbidden pacts, and a prophecy, long forgotten, hinted at the emergence of a new force, one that the three of us were entwined with, whether we were ready or not. "You are not ordinary," one elder said, his voice rasping with age and authority. "The Omega of the bond, she will not only guide but protect, and in her strength lies the survival of the pack." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Protect? Survival? The words echoed in my chest, mingling with the rapid pulse of the bond. I glanced at Aiden and Ryan. Their eyes were locked on me, intense, unwavering, and I could feel the energy between us react, almost sentient, as though it knew the weight of this revelation. Then came the whispered warnings. Traitors within the academy, outsiders watching from the forest. whispers of powers that could challenge even the strongest alphas. The room seemed to close in around me, shadows deepening, the bond thrumming with urgency, protective, insistent. Lauren and Ariana's presence in the hall didn't help. Their eyes were fixed on Aiden, calculating, scheming, oblivious to the bond but aware of its influence. I felt a flicker of jealousy, of fear, of defiance. The tension tightened, and I realized that mastering the bond wasn't just about controlling power. It was about navigating desire, loyalty, and trust, all while facing threats that lurked both inside and outside the pack. Aiden's hand brushed mine subtly, grounding yet igniting. Ryan mirrored the gesture on my other side, anchoring, protective, impossible to ignore. The three of us were bound, and the bond pulsed like a living entity, aware of the threats, of the secrets, and of the tensions threading through our hearts. By the time the elders finished their warnings, my mind was spinning, heart racing, and the bond thrummed insistently, alive and aware. The weight of destiny pressed against me, desire coiled tight, fear sharpened every nerve. The forest beyond the academy seemed to respond, wind rustling like whispers, shadows shifting with intention. Aiden leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. "We'll face this together," he murmured, voice low, commanding, intimate. "The bond is our strength." And I, his gaze darkened, magnetic, "I won't let anything take you from us." Ryan's hand tightened over mine, anchoring me, yet sending a pulse of warmth and tension through my chest. "Nor I," he said simply, voice low, firm, unwavering. The bond surged in response, protective, alive, insistent. My body trembled, fear, desire, and exhilaration coiling into a storm that I could barely contain. I realized, with a shiver of both anticipation and dread, that the trials, the training, the threats, they were all preparing us. For what? I didn't yet know. But one thing was certain: the web of secrets had been revealed, and the bond that tied us together would be tested like never before. And whatever emerged from the shadows, we would face it as one united, unstoppable, bound by more than fate, more than instinct, more than desire. Chapter 10: Eclipse of the Heart. The full moon hung low and ominous over the forest, casting the clearing in silver and shadow. The air was thick with tension, every breath tasting of pine, earth, and anticipation. Tonight, the bond that had pulsed through me since its awakening would be tested, against instinct, desire, and danger, beyond anything I had imagined. Aiden and Ryan flanked me, their presence more than protective. It was commanding, grounding, intoxicating. The three of us were connected, the bond a living force thrumming through our veins, alive with warning, with desire, with unyielding power. Every flick of my pulse echoed in their hearts, every tremor of fear mirrored in their steady strength. "You're ready," Aiden said, voice low but resonant, carrying through the stillness. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Ryan's hand found mine, firm and anchoring, yet sending sparks of warmth and tension through me. "We've got this together." The forest beyond the clearing shifted, shadows moving unnaturally. The presence we had felt for weeks, the one lurking just beyond perception, emerged. Tall, predatory, eyes glinting with malice, it stepped into the moonlight. I felt the bond surge, protective, alive, warning us with every nerve. The creature let out a low growl, a sound that vibrated through the earth and into my chest. My omega instincts flared, entwined with the bond, amplifying my senses, my fear, my determination. I could feel every movement before it happened, every intention before it was acted upon. The bond pulsed in harmony with Aiden and Ryan, an unbreakable thread of power and connection. "You'll not harm her," Aiden said, stepping forward, dominance radiating in every motion. Ryan mirrored him, protective, unyielding, and the bond throbbed with anticipation, amplifying every ounce of our strength. The creature lunged, fast and brutal. Time slowed, every motion magnified. I felt the bond pull me, guide me, connect me, and instinctively I moved with it, dancing through the chaos, a triad of energy, desire, and power. Aiden's hand brushed mine as we synchronized our movements. Ryan's presence steadied me, grounding even as the adrenaline and desire coiled tighter in my chest. The battle was as much mental as it was physical. The creature's attacks were precise, testing our instincts, probing our bond, seeking weakness. But the bond responded, alive, protective, thrumming with power that surged from me into them, from them into me, an unbroken cycle of instinct and desire. Time blurred, shadows and moonlight flickered across the forest floor. Every heartbeat echoed through my chest, every breath intertwined with theirs. The ache of longing, the pull of desire, the intensity of fear. They all fused into clarity. I wasn't just an Omega. I was part of something greater, stronger than instinct, stronger than fear, stronger than the sum of three hearts intertwined by fate and bond. Finally, the creature faltered, sensing the unity it could not break. With a coordinated surge, Aiden, Ryan, and I struck in unison, bond, instinct, and power fused. The creature reeled, eyes wide with shock and fury, before retreating into the shadows from which it had come. The forest seemed to exhale, the tension breaking in a ripple that left the air electric. We stood together, chest heaving, sweat and moonlight glistening on skin. The bond thrummed gently now, protective, steady, alive. Desire still lingered, coiled tight, but now tempered with understanding, with connection, with trust. Aiden's gaze found mine, dark, intense, commanding. The bond, it's stronger than I imagined, stronger than any of us expected. Ryan's hand pressed over mine, anchoring, grounding, intimate. We're unstoppable like this, together. I felt the ache of longing between them, the tension, the desire, and yet I also felt clarity. The bond had revealed truth, not just power but heart. I was theirs, and they were mine, inseparable, connected in a way that defied the chaos of the world around us. Luna, Aiden murmured, voice low, near my ear, you are ours, and we are yours. Ryan's breath brushed my other side, his hand tightening over mine. Always. The moonlight bathed us, shadows stretching across the clearing. The forest whispered around us, alive and patient. Danger still lingered, secrets still waited, but for the first time, I understood. The bond was not just protection, not just instinct. It was love, unyielding, undeniable, and eternal. Desire, fear, instinct, and trust coiled together, a triad unbroken. And in the eclipse of my heart, I realized I was complete, bound to both of them, unstoppable, alive, and ready for whatever the future held. The forest, the shadows, the moon itself seemed to bow to the bond, acknowledging the power we shared. And as I stood between Aiden and Ryan, hearts and breaths synchronized, I knew no threat, no fear, no force could sever what we had forged, because we were three. Bound by blood, by bond, by heart, together, always.